ridiculous. 2 weeks after he divorced me over a little kiss, he cking lottery. Should I call it my bad luck that my husband won the lottery 2 weeks after he divorced me? How could anyone be so unlucky? But I am that unlucky. He got rich overnight after he left me. I couldn't call it cheating because I didn't sleep with anybody. It was just a kiss. I, Amanda, F28, is married to Mike, M32. Mike and I have been married for 6 years now. Our relationship was kind of rocky due to the problems we had. I do freelancing for people, and so the money coming is not that much. Mike is what you called the guy who didn't take life seriously, but I did, and oftentimes I had told him to be more careful about a lot of things. Mike and I met each other at a house party. We instantly got involved with each other and we took it off from there. Mike didn't have a lot, but I was okay with whatever he had, and we decided to get married. Before our marriage, I got to really know him, and we went out for a couple of dates and family dinners. His family were not so happy when we told them we were getting married because they felt like Mike wasn't ready, and also they thought we were rushing into things. After Mike had proposed to me, I made sure to plan our wedding, but it was a really small event. We didn't want to do anything big. I didn't get to invite anyone from my family because we were really talking at that time. Mike and I got married after a lot of planning. Indeed, it was really stressful because I had to manage his family and do what everyone wanted. After the wedding, I moved in with Mike and we started our lives together. But it wasn't easy. The first 2 years, I think that was the time I really struggled the most. Mike had nothing. He had told me that he used all of his money for the wedding and that he had nothing left. But then I was still in my love era, and so I decided to endure and manage with him. During that period, Mike had told me he was doing some business here and there and that it was going to click somehow. Don't get me wrong. Mike wasn't particularly jobless. He was doing some kind of job at that time, but it wasn't really yielding anything good. We weren't starving, but we were not comfortable as we should be. Not long, Mike was thrown out of his job because he wasn't coming to work regularly. I became so confused because I knew that Mike got ready every day in the morning and he usually went out, telling me he was going to work. So when he had told me that he was sacked, I didn't believe him. When he even told me the reason, I became so furious. I had asked him where he usually goes every morning, and he told me that where he was working, he was not been treated well, and so he had to give them space. We argued a lot that day because I was so angry. We weren't feeding well when he was on his job, then how are we supposed to even feed when he had been sacked? We quarreled so much that very day because I was frustrated. Don't get me wrong. I loved Mike, I genuinely did, and that was even the reason I married him, not because of money or anything. So when I discovered he didn't have much, I still married him. Mike left the house angry, and I cried so much that day because physically and emotionally I was exhausted. But when he didn't come back till late that night, I decided to try and reach him. But as I was about to call him, he had walked in. We apologized to each other, and he had told me that he was going to find a job and we were going to be fine. I believed him. Don't get me wrong. I did some little freelancing sometimes, but it wasn't for coming, so it was good as if I didn't have a good paying job. The very next day, Mike got ready and left again. I didn't know where he was going. He didn't tell me, but I believed deep within me that maybe he was actually going to look for a job. But I was wrong. It went on for a while. Mike getting ready in the morning and coming back late at night. He kept telling me that he was looking for work and it was working out for him. But I decided to suggest to him that maybe it was time for him to come down from his high horse and look for a minimal job which could put food on our table and also pay the bills because the bills were really piling up, but he didn't agree with me. He told me that it was not what he wanted to do, and so he wasn't going to do it. I waited for a while, and when I saw that Mike wasn't going to get this big break he had been talking about, I told myself that it was time for me to go out and look for jobs myself so I could be able to feed myself and also do some necessary things for myself. I went out and I got a job as a waitress at a restaurant. The pay wasn't good, but I knew it was going to keep me afloat. I made preparations and I started work the very next day. I did talk to Mike first before resuming, but he was really excited like I was ready. Reasons I came to know a few weeks after I started the job. I started work and I was paid every day, but it wasn't really enough. But me and Mike were able to eat and I was paying the bills I could pay. I kept on working and I kept on asking Mike when he was going to get a new job because I honestly felt like he became really comfortable after I got a job. He wasn't going out every morning like he used to. He could always sleep throughout the day and I could come back from work and see him exactly at the spot I had left him. I decided to ask him about his work, but he didn't really give me any reasonable answer. I left it and I moved on. I decided to take more shifts in order to be able to make enough money, but it wasn't really easy. Every penny I made went to catering for Mike and I. He wasn't contributing at all. But after a few weeks, Mike I had told me that he got something that he was doing and that he had some money which he had given me. I had asked him then how he got the money, and he told me that he saw a job, but it wasn't much and that he was going to manage it for a while. I was happy because at least I wasn't going to take too many extra shifts again. The burden was going to be reduced. Mike made a lot of effort. He told me to take some time off work and that he was ready to pamper me, but I told him that he should use that money to pay our bills, but he insisted and he took me to my favorite restaurant. He bought me gifts and he had told me how much he appreciates me. I was really happy. He made me happy. Mike told me that I should stop working, but I refused because I didn't want to go back to how things were before where we could barely feed. But after some time, Mike broke again. I was happy I didn't stop working. If not, what could have happened to me? This time around, he was really frustrated and he took the frustration on me. He became so cranky. He was always cooking something in his head. How I wasn't home when he needed me and how I was not there to support him and how there was no food at home and how I was always coming late etc. I made plans to avoid him because after coming home from work with that much stress, I didn't want to get into an argument with him. But when he started going on and on about how he thinks I might be seeing other men, I immediately lost my cool and I got on with him. I had told him if he was really frustrated, he should go and get money from his family, and he told me where I thought he got the money he had spent on me. I told him I didn't ask for him to spend anything on me, but I had to ask him why he lied to me then, because he had told me that he got the money from where he was working. He even told me that he got a job, so Mike lied to me. I couldn't believe it, so what had he been doing all this while? Lazing around? I decided I had had enough and I took some of my necessary things and I went out. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I needed space and I needed to be far away from Mike. I got a motel that day. It wasn't good, but I was going to manage. I didn't have anybody, and that hit me hard. If I had a friend or a close family member, I could have gone to their place, but there was no one. I switched off my phone so that no one could reach me, and I went to work the next day. Halfway through work, Mike came to the restaurant to make a scene. I had to beg him to stop if I was not going to be fired. I dragged him to the back of the restaurant, and we talked for some time. He apologized, and he went on and on about how I was important to him and that he didn't mean anything he said. I told him that I needed time. He agreed, and he left. I decided to take an extra shift in order for me to take my mind off things, and I got to my motel late and I slept off immediately because of how tired I was. The next day I thought about everything and I decided to forgive Mike because I wasn't really the one to stay angry at him for long. I got home and I didn't see him at home, maybe because it was a Sunday and he usually got to see his family on Sunday afternoon. He got back later that day and we cuddled and we agreed that we were not going to fight again because we hated fighting. After everything we went through that period, Mike came clean to me that he didn't have anything to do, and he wanted to stop lying to me. I told him that he could always take on a small job at the moment and that it must not be something big, but something that we could survive on at the moment. He agreed, and he told me he was going to look for a job no matter how small. I was happy because that was at least a step in the right direction, right? He did get a small job and he did it for a while, but he wasn't really committed. And so it was long before he was fired. He told me that the next job he was going to do better, and I believed him. Unknown to me that I was actually dealing with someone who had a problem, and his problem was beyond me. The next job, the same thing happened again. It became a pattern. I decided I was not going to allow it to affect me anymore, and I faced my work. One Sunday afternoon, Mike had told me that his parents had invited us to lunch, and I went reluctantly because they had made it clear that they didn't like me, and the feeling was very much mutual. His mother kept on going on about how I wasn't a good wife and how Mike had told them I had been avoiding him. I felt so disappointed because it was unnecessary for him to bring our relationship to his family table. His mother kept on talking about how I should be grateful because in her head she was feeding me. I told her that I was feeding myself off what I am being paid at work and she should be ashamed of herself because she had a son who was struggling and she couldn't help him get a job to even save his life. But she had told me that she paid for our wedding and I should at least be thankful, but I was taken aback because Mike had told me that he paid for the wedding with all of his money, and that was the reason why we were struggling after the wedding. I didn't know what to say anymore and I left the house. I got home and when Mike came, I had told him how disappointed I was in him because he had repeatedly lied to me, and he just watched his mother insult me and he didn't say jack. I had asked him why he was always ready to raise his voice to me, but when the time came for him to defend me, he ignored me. I didn't even wait for him to speak and I went to bed. I got up very early that morning and I left for work. I didn't even wait for him to wake up because I wasn't ready to face him or get any explanation from him. During my break, I was sitting alone thinking about how I ended up in all of the mess I was going through. Was I wrong to have loved someone wholeheartedly? I was interrupted by Jill. Jill started working at the restaurant a few weeks ago and we became friends. At least she is the first person I can call a friend. She's been a form of emotional support. She had always advised me and made me comfortable. Most importantly, she was always there for me. Mike and I went on like that for a few weeks. I could see that he wanted to talk to me badly, but I was not giving him the space to talk. I also did want us to stop fighting, but everything was happening at a time that I needed my space and also at a time where I was really frustrated. Somehow we got past our differences, and it all was for the best because I learned a lot from the problem we had. And I also found out that my husband had always been a liar. It was a great blow. I started questioning everything we ever had. I did forgive him, but it was not like before again. But with the help of Jill, she encouraged me to move past it, and that marriage was hard, and I needed to fight to keep my family. But I had to tell her that it wasn't really my fault. I had always been the one fighting for us, and it was really exhausting. But in order to cheer me up, Jill made it her mission to help me lighten up. Mike and I were okay, but we weren't like before anymore. But we were still there. Jill invited me to go out with some of her friends, and I accepted because I needed anything that could take my mind off what I was going through. She introduced me to some amazing set of people who welcomed me to their midst wholeheartedly, and I was very happy. I didn't have friends, and so I was grateful for the once I was able to make it through Jill. Among the friends Jill had, there was Pete. Pete is that kind of guy who goes for whatever he wants. And at the point of us being introduced, I found out that he was somewhat intrigued by me. I didn't want to think too much into it, and so I brushed it off. After the hangout, I went about my normal life with Mike. We started working towards trusting each other again. When I saw that he was actually trying, I made it a point to always acknowledge his efforts. He deeply told me how sorry he was and how he was working towards being a changed man. I bought everything he was saying and doing toward being a better person because I did love him and I wanted us to be like we were before. But I didn't know I was going to receive the shock of my life. It was really a busy day at the restaurant, and Pete came by to see Jill. Apparently he stopped by to eat, but he was at his table staring at me all through. But I ignored him. He had said that he was inviting Jill and I to his house opening party, and that we should come because it was going to be fun. I was kind of skeptical about it, but Jill convinced me otherwise. After work that day, I went home and I decided to do some laundry because it was beginning to pill up. But I got the biggest shock of my life when I saw a lottery ticket in Mike's pocket. So this was all he had been doing? Gambling with the little money that we had? I was really furious that very day. I began to think about my life and how I had really been through a lot just because I decided to love someone. Like, why could he do that to me? I was at work trying to make a living, taking extra jobs and making sure I was paying bills, and my husband had the money to gamble instead. Isn't that great? When he got back home, I was surprisingly calm. I confronted him and he told me this story of how we were going to be rich, and I asked him if he genuinely at any point looked for work, or if he was working at any point since we got married, and he told me that that was his work. Gambling. I didn't know when I began to cry, so I was lied to my entire marriage. I had been living a lie. I began to think maybe the love was also fake. But Mike went on and on about how I had been making mockery of his work and so on. But was I really making a mockery of his work? When I was struggling with someone who didn't exactly have a future in gambling. But the tip of it all was when he told me that it was the work I was making a mockery of that gave me a wedding. I felt like I was slapped across the face. I immediately left him and went to the room to cool off. I knew that he was genuinely trying to hurt my feelings, and he succeeded. Jill called me and told me she was coming to pick me up for the party. I wanted to tell her I wasn't up to it, but I told myself I was going to put myself first and have fun instead of just sitting down and thinking. I got ready and went to the party with Jill. Mike tried to speak with me, but it ignored him. The party was up to standard. It was really big. We met up with the rest and we took drinks. The night was progressing well until Pete got really touchy and close. Well, Pete and I kissed, and that was because I was really tipsy and he was as well. I didn't know that Mike had followed me to the party. When I realized what I had done, I tried to get up and leave when I saw Mike looking at me with disappointed eyes. I went after him and I tried to explain things to him, but he wouldn't listen. He told me that I shouldn't bother coming back home and that it was over between us. I collapsed right there and I cried my eyes out. Jill came to my rescue and she took me to her place. I was there for a while and I was trying to fix things between us, but I was not succeeding. I went to the house and he didn't allow me in. He told me about how he had plans for us and I went on to cheat on him, but I told him that it was not intentional and that I was drunk. But he told me that it was what I had always wanted to do and that he had been suspecting me for a while now. I was taken aback because it wasn't true. I was trying my best to beg him, but he didn't listen to me. He parked my things out and I made sure to park everything and I left. I still had hope that somehow I was going to get through to him. All that hope shattered when I was served divorce papers at work. I tried to call Mike, but there was no answer. His mother didn't even make things easier because she came to mock me about how I was never good for her son. I was so disappointed because I really made a huge mistake marrying into such a family that their son was gambling and they were fine with it. We met up with lawyers and Mike was solid about the divorce I begged, and I asked him to reconsider and let us work things out because we had come a long way to just end things like that, and also because I loved him. But he told me that he was done and it was time to move on. I quickly signed the papers and I left. I went back to Jill's house and I cried like never before. I cried for what I lost, for my love, for my sacrifice, and for everything I had been through. Jill helped me to pick up the pieces and I had to get back to work because Jill had been covering for me and I felt like I needed to take that burden off her. 2 weeks later, I was at the restaurant working a double shift because I had to start looking for a place and also to get enough money and help fill out a little. Mike came into the restaurant and I thought that he came to fix things between us, but I was wrong. He came to rub it in my face about how he had won the lottery he had been gaming for months now. He told me how I wasn't patient with him and so on. I felt like a fool for loving someone like him. Mike threw money on me like I was some sort of dancer. He went on and on about how cheap I was and I began to cry. That was a very bitter way to get back at someone. He disgraced me in front of the entire restaurant and then he left. I felt like I shouldn't have loved the way I did. Because honestly, I didn't deserve the cruelty I received from Mike, all because of a little mistake. There's no better way to say it, I just hate the fact that Mike is now rich. I've been so miserable, but he has been living life. He is now traveling and people are rubbing it in my face. I heard that he had gotten properties and he was now living fine. I was able to move out of Jill's house and I got my own little place. Since Mike disgraced me, I haven't seen him and I want it to remain like that. I still hate him with everything in me and I hope he gets his karma, because I'll never understand why he's not ready to even give me something to feed on. I guess there's nothing I can do about it anyway.